Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and a very good afternoon to all. I am Sunny Sabarwal and on behalf of Care Ratings, welcome you to our live webinar on RLNG, Need of the Hour to Fuel Enhanced Consumption of Natural Gas in India. We sincerely appreciate your time in joining us for this webinar. To take you further on this, may I introduce our speakers for today, Ms. Swati Agrawal, Ms. Jyotsna Gadgil and Mr. Manek Narang. Ms. Swati Agrawal is working with Care Ratings as Senior Director and Company National Head. She has an industry experience of over 20 years with CARE and has looked after corporate ratings, infrastructure ratings, SME ratings, etc. over these years in different capacities. Ms. Jyotsna Gadgil is working with CARE as a director and has an industry experience of over 20 years. Mr. Manik Narang is a sector specialist for oil and gas sector at CARE Ratings and has an industry experience of over 15 years. I would like to inform the participants that the discussion will be in the form of a presentation which will be visible on your screen. In case of any queries, may I request all to key in their questions in the slot provided. Also request you to key in your name and company details. May I now request Ms. Swati Agrawal to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Sunny. A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to all of you. We'll start with a brief overview. Natural gas has a distinct competitiveness owing to its eco-friendly traits and pricing competitiveness over alternate fuels. This has been a catalyst which has led to increase in demand for natural gas. World over, US has been the highest consumer, followed by Russia and China, and globally natural gas forms around 24% of the overall fuel consumption mix after oil and coal. In the Indian context, natural gas scenario has been impacted by factors like domestic gas production, which has witnessed a downward trend, natural gas pricing scenario, which is highly regulated and has seen its first increase after years, and the LNG import scenario, which has been increasing steadily to meet the demand supply gap. Consequently, compared to the global average in India, LNG consumption forms only around 6 to 7% of the overall energy consumption mix. On the consumption demand drivers in India, fertilizer and power sector have been the largest consumers, followed by city gas distribution and the hydrocarbon sector. The urea gas policy, announcement of substantial addition to urea generation capacity, as also the increasing focus on gas as fuel for vehicle and city gas distribution augurs well for the demand for natural gas. However, the power generating plants based on natural gas will continue to face challenges related to the availability of fuel at viable prices given the poor track record of domestic gas generation and the higher pricing of imported gas. Notwithstanding these challenges faced by the domestic gas production, it is likely that this environment friendly natural gas will have a higher share in the fuel mix given the increasing global focus on cleaner environment marked by the Paris Climate Accord, as well as the Indian government's focus on clean and renewable energy. Consequently, robust RLNG infrastructure would be required to meet the higher requirement for natural gas in India, especially in the absence of cross-border gas pipelines. Now, what really is RLNG? RLNG is a process of converting liquefied natural gas back to natural gas. The process includes liquefaction of natural gas and its transportation in the liquid form through specialized carriers to its destination, which are the RLNG terminals, where it is converted back into gaseous state. The gas is converted for the ease of transport and storage, and it takes only about 1 by 600th the volume of natural gas in the gaseous states, thereby making it a cost efficient way to transport. As we move to our presentation today, we shall cover various topics like India's natural gas scenario, production trends, sectors driving the growth in natural gas, and we shall also look at the various government initiatives, policies to promote natural gas, as well as the pricing and marketing freedom, existing and upcoming RLNG terminal infrastructure, as also we would also look at the credit risk perspectives for entities engaged in the RLNG business. I now request Manik and Jyotsna to take this forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Swati. Now I will take the presentation forward. To begin with, I will begin with nationwide share in global natural gas reserves, production, and consumption. As can be seen from the table on the screen, US is the leader in the natural gas consumption with about 22% share, followed by Russian Federation with 11% share and China with 7.9% share. India stands at distant 20th position with mere 1.4% share. US also leads the pack with the largest producer of natural gas having 21.1% share, again Russia being the second and Iran third with 16.3% and 5.7% shares respectively. Here as well India share is a mere 0.8%. As regards the reserves, Iran has the highest reserves of natural gas, followed by Russia and Qatar. India's share in global reserves stands at again a mere 0.7%. So this is indicative that India lags in all the three segments like reserves, production and consumption. Now moving to the next slide, I would cover energy mix with global versus India. Again, as shown in the pie chart, natural gas constitutes only 6% of India's energy mix, whereas the world average is 4 times higher at 24%, which indicates that there exists a huge potential for the expected increase of natural demand in India. Globally, oil has the maximum share, followed by coal and natural gas. However, in India, coal dominates, which is followed by oil 29% and natural gas contributes a mere 6.23%. There has been a paradigm shift from consumption of pollution-intensive fossil fuels to environmental-friendly natural gas, and the same is expected to further alter in favor of the natural gas, which has also been highlighted by Swati. As per the Hydrocarbon Vision 2025 report, the share of natural gas in the energy mix is expected to increase to 20% by 2025 from existing 6.23%. So there's a lot to go to increase the natural consumption in India. In addition, India's per capita consumption of natural gas is just 34.6 cubic meters in comparison with world average of 427.9 cubic meters. Given almost 12 times higher world's average and India's expected growth rate of around 6.7 to 6.8%, spurt in the demand of natural gas is inevitable. Now we move to the next slide. We will come to a India specific scenario for natural gas. The Indian natural gas industry is characterized by fall in domestic production of natural gas, increasing demand led by fertilizer and city gas distribution sector, increasing dependency on imports leading to higher demand for RLNG terminals, and favorable regime focus towards cleaner environment. As RLNG is a explained by Swati that it's a imported commodity and how it is imported and why it is required. So the demand of RLNG is inversely related to the volume of domestically produced gas, and it is also a function of increasing demands from sectors such as fertilizer and CGD sector. Now on the screen you can see a graph which shows the natural gas consumption versus production and import in the Indian scenario. So it is quite evident that from the green is the percentage of the production. So the share of production has come down from 78% to 50%, and likewise the import which were required to meet the increased domestic demand of natural gas have increased from 22% to 50%. So the domestic gas production decreased at a CAGR of 10% from financial year 2011 to financial year 16-17. And during the same period, the imports increased from 12.89 BCM to 24.69 BCM. However, increased imports to an extent compensated to the domestic natural gas demand. Also, as depicted in the graph, during financial years 16 and 17, India imported almost equivalent volume of domestically produced gas, whereas during financial year 2010-11, the share of imported gas in total consumption was only 22%. So from here, we see that there has been a consistent decline in the natural gas production, which has paved way for the imported natural gas, which is in the form of RLNG. So these things I've already explained. These are the texts which I've explained. So I'll move to the next slide. So what reasons we can think of, or what reasons we can assign for the decline in the domestic production of the natural gas? So first reason is the aging gas blocks. This is one of the key factors for declining this production. Though the government is working to enhance the production, however, the same would largely depend upon the extent of use of technology and the capital investment. The second point works out to be lower than expected production from KG Basin, which was a star well for Reliance Industries. The KG D6 discovery sparked the expectations from domestic gas production. However, the same was short-lived as the production started falling from 2012. The other point is over-regulation. Oil and gas is highly regulated activity as it entails energy security of any country, and India being energy deficit country has regulations with respect to pricing and marketing of domestic gas. Another factor for the decline in domestic production has been viability and the pricing. Despite the recent increase in the domestic natural gas in October 2017, the exploration and production activity is still not remunerative and is also one of the reasons for limited private sector participation. The related reasons for private sector participation is also the oil and gas activity being very high capital intensity, where only players with deep pockets can participate and can invest into such business. Because of this reason, you can see in a pie chart that bulk of the domestic natural gas production comes from the oil PSUs. So oil PSUs constituted around 80%, 79 to 80%, and the private companies along with the joint ventures contributed only 21%. Now coming next to the traits of the natural gas industry. Natural gas in the current scenario is very important for the growth of any economy. It is used both as a fuel and feedstock in sectors such as power generation, industrial uses, cement production, cooking gas, transportation, etc. It is used as a fuel, and in fertilizers and petrochemical sector, it is used as a feedstock or input. And out of the total consumption in financial year 17, 61% has been consumed as a fuel, whereas rest 31% is used as a feedstock. Now we come to the sector-wise consumption of natural gas. You can spend a minute on this graph which depicts the various sectors, various user industries which are using the natural gas both as an energy and as non-energy, that is as feedstock as well as fuel. So basis the discovery of Reliance KG-D6 gas, many gas-based power plants were set up and natural gas production from that well was peaked in 2011. However, the same could not be sustained and gas production decreased significantly leading to enhanced deficit in the natural gas demand supply. Fertilizer sector, primarily it is the urea only, is the largest consumer of natural gas and it is used as a feedstock with 30% share, followed by power sector with 23% and city gas distribution with 14% share. Natural gas demand in India is expected to be led by fertilizers and CGD sector. However, demand from the power sector is not expected to increase on account of pricing unviability of costlier RLNG gas. Natural gas, which is used as feedstock in urea, is expected to increase on account of conversion of three naphtha-based urea plants to natural gas, which would require additional natural gas of around 2.97 SCMD. Then there are revival of five urea plants, including Ramagundam fertilizers, and three plants of Hindustan Urvak, which would require additional natural gas of 2.54 SCMD. Also, government has set up a target to fully indigenize urea by 2022, meaning thereby it wants to reduce the imports to nil and 100% of the requirement of urea should be met through domestic production. Presently, India is dependent to an extent of 18% on urea imports. With the reduction of imports to nil, the natural gas of 5.82 CMD would be required. Natural gas thus is very important in case of fertilizer sector which is expected to grow. Now we come to city gas distribution sector. Natural gas in city gas distribution space has significantly increased during financial 17 on account of natural gas being cleaner fuel and environmental concerns. Government thrust on cleaner fuel, cleaner environment is likely to continue and thus natural gas would be increasingly required for city gas distribution sector. In later parts of the slides, we would also cover how city gas distribution sector would increase the demand for natural gas. So there is a demand. So that is the reason that a lot of new interest is there in the RLNG terminals. So currently India has 4 operational LNG terminals with installed capacity of around 26.3 MMTPA. The largest being the Dahej plant, owned by India's largest LNG importer, Petronet LNG Limited. One of the key factors which impeded the LNG imports in India is insufficient regasification facilities. To take benefit of low global oil and gas prices and to bring RLNG in India till the time domestic production gets a push, the government has planned development of large capacities for regasification. LNG terminals of around 27.2 MMTPA, which is metric million tons per annum capacity are under development. Mostly, yeah, and biggest player in the RLNG is the PSU promoted Petronet. Other existing players include Hazira LNG Private Limited, which is promoted by Shell Gas and Total. Given the potential of increasing natural gas, in addition to established oil and gas natural players, there are other players also who have immense interest in RLNG. These include Adani Group, which already owns a stake in GSPC LNG, Hiranandani Group, and Swan Group. Now we move to pricing and marketing for domestic gas initially and then to the RLNG. The demand for natural gas fairly depends on the regulatory updates as domestic and imported gases are priced and marketed differently. Pricing and allocation of domestic gas is regulated. From the screen you can see that the first was Government of India formulated the gas utilization policy in 2008 with the highest priority given to fertilizer sector followed by the power sector. In 2014, it was directed that CGD players would get their full requirement of natural gas from the domestic sources. That means it will get the low price gas from the domestic sources. Further, gas pricing formula as recommended by Rangarajan was adopted with modification, which shall be that price would be reviewed every 6 months. Weighted average rates prevalent at Henry Hub of US, National Balancing Point of UK rates in Alberta, Canada, Russia with a lag of 1/4 has been the determinant for the new pricing formula. Marketing and pricing freedom allowed for gas produced from high pressure, high temperature, deep water and ultra deep water areas with a ceiling price. The price would be covering in the next slide. So we move to the next slide, which is pricing trend of the domestic gas. The new gas pricing was effective, which is I explained in the last slide, which was adopted with modification from Rangarajan committee. It was effective from November 2014, and at that time price was fixed at USD $5.05 per MMBTU. The price consistently reduced till April 2017, which is very clearly evident on the graph on your screens. It got reduced to 2.48, and for the first time since the new pricing, the trend was reversed, and the price for October 2017 to March 2018 is fixed at $2.89 per MMBTU. Though the falling gas price have reversed for the first time since the formula was devised, however, it is still challenging for the E&P players, especially in the private sector, to enhance or to invest into the E&P business. Then there is a pricing, and in order to encourage the production from deep field or complex field, there is a pricing and marketing freedom for gas produced from deep water, ultra deep water, high temperature and high pressure fields. The present price ceiling has been increased from $5.56 per MMBTU to $6.3 for the period October 17 to March 18, which is 6 monthly and would be revised from April 2018. So as you can see that there has been a decline in the domestic gas prices, but with the increase in the price, global price, it has also reversed the trend. So now we move to the next slide, which talks about import pricing and marketing for RLNG. India's LNG imports have mainly been sourced from Qatar, which accounts for around 63%, followed by Nigeria, which accounts for 12.2%, and Australia with 5%. Globally, if we see, Japan is the largest importer at 31.6% of LNG, followed by South Korea and China, and India stands at fourth position with 7.2%. Imported gas, as I explained in my last slides, that domestic gas is purely pricing and there is no pricing and marketing freedom, and is purely regulated. However, in case of imported gas, there is no regulation with respect to the pricing and marketing, and it can be priced and marketed without any government intervention. So now we move to the next slide, which talks about how the government is taking steps on promoting the natural gas. With increasing impetus coming in the form of environmental concerns and various code directives, city gas distribution projects have become a priority segment of natural gas business. The Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas is actively rolling out policies, roadmaps for city gas distribution networks and connecting major cities with green highways. And as a part of this impetus only, during the budget 2017, which was the last budget, the basic customs duty on import of LNG was reduced from 5% to 4.5%. That means it was halved to make it a bit more economical. As per the ministry guidelines issued in August 2014, CNG and PNG domestic gas requirements of CGD players are to be fulfilled from GAIL under the APM mechanism. That is, they will get the 100% allocation at the domestic pricing, which is presently USD 2.89 per MMBTU. The guideline moving the CGD requirement on the top of the gas allocation list has provided assurance of availability of gas to the CGD players in the country, which also leads to positive prospects for the CGD industry and a cleaner environment. Now I hand over to Jyotsna for taking the presentation forward.
Thanks, Manek. Good afternoon, everyone. Now we are going to discuss the main challenges faced by RLNG industry. In spite of huge deficit, in India the growth in number of RLNG terminals has been limited in the past. The main reasons that can be attributed are elaborated in this slide. First one can be high capital intensity. The project cost for setting up a 5 MMTPA RLNG terminal is in the range of around 4,500 to 5,000 crore with gestation of around 3.5 years. In the past, only PSU joint ventures invested in the same. However, with established business model, now many large private players are also setting up terminals, which include groups like Adani, Hiranandani. Also, reportedly, Tata Group firm is also setting in at Gujarat terminal in Swan Energy. As regards pricing, the domestic gas prices have almost halved over the period of 2 years from $5.05 to $2.48, although it marginally went up to 2.89 for current half year October to March. But these low ranging prices makes it less attractive for players to deploy capital. India being energy deficit country, PSUs would continue to invest in E&P activities. However, private sector participation is likely to remain limited. Next, geopolitical risks. India imports LNG largely from Qatar, wherein sanctions were recently imposed by Middle East countries, including Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc. It has been maintained that such an action is not likely to have any impact on the exports of LNG by Qatar. However, any further deterioration in the situation may be mitigated to some extent by procuring LNG on spot basis, though it would be at relatively higher prices. Plans to boost gas supply through cross-country pipelines like the Tapi and the Iran-Pakistan-India pipeline have not led to any success, though it's been talked for many number of years now. But due to high geopolitical risks, it has not culminated. Evacuation of pipeline structure also poses challenges. So far, in India, the pipeline structure is skewed in the western region. The eastern and southern parts are still not well connected. The challenges lie in land acquisition, various clearances from multiple agencies, which have delayed the projects under implementation for setting up pipeline infrastructure, which in turn has affected the RLNG prospects. A case in point here is Petronet's Kochi terminal, which is grossly underutilized due to the pipeline availability issues. Regulatory challenges in consumer industries, as already discussed, primarily the demand drivers for natural gas are fertilizer, power and CGD, all of which are highly regulated in India, either in terms of pricing of final output or in terms of gas allocation policy.
As a result, any change in the regulation of procurement or pricing of these respective input or output of user industries will have an impact on the fortunes of imported gas. Now let's understand the key changes under regulatory regime for RLNG. The liberalization of E&P sector in India was in a way initiated in 1997 under the new Exploration and Licensing Policy (NELP). This was a landmark policy adopted by Government of India in 1997, indicating the new contractual and fiscal model for award of hydrocarbon acreages towards exploration and production. NELP was applicable for all contracts entered into by the government between 1997 and 2016. NELP regime was able to accelerate the quest for hydrocarbon exploration and also bring in state-of-the-art technology and efficiency of operations to the country. There have been 9 rounds of NELP and 4 coal-bed methane rounds during this period. It helped in attracting larger number of private and foreign companies apart from PSUs. Total 261 blocks were awarded, out of which about 9 are in production. In October 2014, the Government of India notified new domestic natural gas pricing guidelines 2014. Under this policy, it tweaked the Rangarajan Committee formula and came up with formula benchmarking several global natural gas hubs. The pricing regime is applicable to all natural gas produced domestically in the public sector or by the private sector firms. As per the mechanism approved in October 2014, the price of domestically produced natural gas is to be revised every 6 months, April and October, as Manek also mentioned, using the weighted average or rates prevalent in gas surplus economies at Henry Hub of the US, National Balancing Point of the UK, and rates in Alberta, Canada, with a lag of 1 quarter. The price so notified would be applied prospectively every 1st November, and it would be based on GCV basis. The government also implemented the decision to allow marketing and pricing freedom for gas produced from high pressure, high temperature, deep water and ultra deep water areas, with a ceiling price arrived at on the basis of landed price of alternative fuels. This policy is aimed to encourage investment in difficult areas and incentivize monetization of domestic gas resources. These policy guidelines are applicable to future discoveries as well as existing discoveries which are yet to commence commercial production as of 1st of January 2016. Hydrocarbon exploration and licensing policy. The government, with its increased impetus on growing the domestic production, in March 16 replaced the NELP with HELP. The 4 main aspects of this policy are: number 1, it has uniform license for exploration and production of all forms of hydrocarbon. Secondly, it gives open acreage policy. It is an open acreage policy. Thirdly, easy to administer revenue sharing model. And last, fourth is marketing and pricing freedom for the crude and oil natural gas produced. HELP was devised to ensure higher domestic oil and gas production, to attract substantial investment in the sector and generate sizable employment. The policy is also aimed at enhancing transparency and reducing administrative discretion. The uniform license will enable the contractor to explore conventional as well as unconventional oil and gas resources, including the coal bed methane, shale gas or oil, tight gas, and gas hydrates under a single license. The concept of open acreage policy will enable E&P companies to choose blocks from the designated area. Earlier, the contracts were based on the concept of profit sharing, where profits were shared between government and the contractor after recovery of cost. Under the profit sharing methodology, it became necessary for the government to scrutinize the cost details of private participants, which led to many delays and disputes. Under the new regime, the government will not be concerned with the cost incurred and will receive a share of gross revenue from the sale of oil, gas, giving rise to a new fiscal model based on the revenue sharing. Recognizing the higher risks and costs involved in exploration of production from offshore areas, lower royalty rates for such areas have been provided as compared to NELP royalty rates. A graded system of royalty rates have been introduced in which royalty rates decrease from shallow water to deep water and ultra deep water. On the lines of NELP, cess and import duty will not be applicable on blocks awarded under the new policy. Now we can see provisions under open acreage licensing policy. OALP was introduced as per a cabinet decision of the government in March 2016 as part of HELP. OALP gives an option to a company looking for exploring hydrocarbons to select the exploration blocks on its own without waiting for the formal bid round from the government. Under this policy, a bidder intending to explore hydrocarbons like oil and gas, CBD, gas hydrate, etc., can apply to the government seeking exploration of any new block which is not already covered by exploration. The government will examine the expression of interest and justify. This slide gives you broader perspective of how HELP and NELP stand vis-a-vis each other. Under the fiscal model, NELP was profit sharing based, whereas HELP is revenue sharing. Cost recovery was possible in NELP. HELP is no more relevant. ENP activities for all hydrocarbons is allowed in HELP, whereas NELP it was not so. The revenue to the government would be shared after cost recovery in NELP, whereas in HELP it would start on production. The main factors which would have impact on the credit profile of players in this sector are summarized in this slide. These are not exhaustive, but can be considered more important to have impact on the credit profile. Promoter strength. As we have seen earlier, this is a capital intensive industry. Hence, resourcefulness as well as the project execution capabilities assume major importance in our analysis. The strength of promoter group to support the capital requirements, its ability as well as commitment for timely support is of paramount importance. Also, the risk appetite in terms of taking up further projects, diversifications, plans, and strategies are assessed. Project execution risk. For a project phase company, arrangements for execution of the project, either greenfield or brownfield, in terms of the team, relevant expertise, obtaining timely approvals are essential to execute the project in a smooth way. Also, funding of equity and debt needs to be tied up to ensure timely completion. Project cost overrun is considered important because this might be caused due to factors which are beyond the company's control but will ultimately have an impact on the project economics and credit metrics. Financial risk assessment. This includes normal financial analysis which we undertake to understand the company's current financial position, the trend in its profitability, gearing, debt coverage, and liquidity indicators. LNG sourcing agreements are important to be seen. The player would have to tie up sourcing arrangement on spot or long-term basis to ensure smooth supply to its consumers. The terms of the long-term agreements will impact its efficiency and also financial profile. Timely renegotiations and renewals of such agreements is also seen. Adequate gas pipeline for evacuation. It has been experienced that delay in having pipeline in place impacts the operations of RLNG players. So, connecting pipeline infrastructure needs to be ensured. Product offtake risk. The consumer industries normally are set up alongside the pipeline, so the key anchor customers are normally identified. MOUs are entered at project stage in many cases. So these will mitigate the offtake risk to that extent. So overall, these broad parameters will have an impact on the overall risk profile of the RLNG players. Now, if we see the Indian scenario, there are about 8 players in RLNG segment, out of which 3 are operational and rest 5 are under project phase or commissioning. The biggest and the oldest player is Petronet LNG, which has 15 MMTPA capacity at Dahej and 5 MTPA at Kochi. It is promoted by all PSUs, BPCL, GAIL, IOCL and ONGC. The Hazira LNG has capacity of 5 MTPA. Ratnagiri Gas and Power, promoted by GAIL and NTPC, has a nameplate capacity of 5 MTPA, but due to unavailability of breakwater wall, its utilization is only 1.4 MTPA. The next 5 are project phase entities: GSPC LNG, Indian Oil LNG, H Energy, Swan LNG, and Andhra Pradesh Gas Distribution. So with this, I hand over to Swati.
Thank you, Jyotsna and Manek. We run through the conclusion slide now. So as we see, natural gas has emerged as a preferred fuel. However, its consumption has not kept pace with the demand, primarily on account of falling gas production as well as limited RLNG infrastructure in the country. Favorable policy initiatives in the user industry, coupled with fall in the RLNG prices, the demand for this green fuel is expected to increase. Thus, there is an increase in the RLNG terminals, up, supported by adequate pipeline infrastructure, appears to be the solution to meet the country's higher demand for this cleaner fuel.
Dear participants, we would now be taking a break for 2 minutes before we come back to take your queries and participate in a panel discussion. Meanwhile, may I request the participants to key in their questions along with the name of the company and their question. Thank you.
Welcome back, friends. We have been receiving questions, so I will take the questions one by one. So, we received the question in one of the cases that uh, why India is lagging behind in the natural gas production in comparison to its other countries across the globe. Like in the slide, also, we have mentioned that India is a distant 20th position with 1.4% share. So primarily India lacks in its reserves also. So that is the first reason that India doesn't have the reserves. The second point would be that India also requires a lot of technology and capital investment and adequate regulatory regime for the increased production of natural gas. Further, there has been impetus by the government with new regulations, and that is expected to lead the higher production of natural gas in future. And also, there's a very valid question has been asked by Mr. Shankar Sharma. The question is, how's the gas supply situation in the light of geopolitical unrest and India's concentration on the Middle East? So that's a very valid question. Like in terms of India imports around 60% of its LNG from Qatar and rest from Nigeria and Australia. So it's a fairly dependent on Middle East, and there was some tension also in the Qatar. However, as we understand that a lot of new global liquefaction natural gas facilities are coming up, which includes in United States and Australia, and that is one of the reasons that Petronet LNG has tied up for its Kochi plant with Australian Gorgon, and for which one cargo has already, we understand that that's already been there. So India is trying to limit its dependency on the Qatar, but it will take some time to diversify its sources. And another question which we received from, I'll just check out the Navneet Phule was the name. Yeah, Navjot Phule. So he's calling from IIT Roorkee. So he has requested that my question is, as natural gas is clean fuel, will switching to natural gas help companies earn carbon credits? Navjot, as I understand that carbon credits are mainly to the renewable sources of energy. However, natural gas being a not being a renewable source, so I don't understand. I don't like. I feel that carbon credits won't be applicable for the usage of the or the high usage of the natural gas. Another question which has come up from uh, Amitabh Gupta is that why in RLNG industry there is a very limited participation of private sector players. Again, this is a very valid question, and the limited participation, in fact, the first India's first RLNG company, Petronet LNG LNG Limited, has been promoted by the oil PSU majors only. The reason for that, it is highly capital intensive. It requires around 4,000 or 4,500 crores of capital for 5 MTPA plant capacity plant. So, and it requires huge technology also. It requires pipeline infrastructure for its evacuation. So almost now India has more than a decade's experience with Petronet LNG, and as we move forward, we see that there is a private participation from Adani with GSPC LNG, Hiranandani with H Energy, and the Swan Group with Swan LNG. So in times to come, with more profitable operations with established business model, we see that more private participation would be there. Though oil and gas sector again being capital intensive, it would be led by uh, oil majors PSUs only. Yeah, then there is a question on the infrastructure, RLNG infrastructure. So the question is, what are the major issues in setting up pipeline infrastructures in India? This is the question from Mumbai, Priya, and the Kochi is one of the apt example for this, wherein the pipeline, whole terminal was set up at 5 MTPA, and then it was stranded and it could not be utilized. The terminal could not be utilized because of the uh, adequate pipe unavailability of the adequate pipeline. And as we understand, it was primarily because of the the company or the GAIL, which was the onus was on GAIL to lay the pipeline, didn't get the sufficient approvals from various authorities to lay the pipeline, and that is the reason that Kochi was underutilized. And another reason not related directly to the pipeline is the Dabhol project of Ratnagiri, where another infrastructure requirement is breakwater wall. Again, the capacity, nameplate capacity is 5 MTPA, but it is being utilized only up to 1.3, 1.4 MTPA only because of breakwater wall could not be constructed. So not only it is not that only RLNG terminal is required, along with ancillary infrastructure is equally important. Otherwise, the offtake would be a problem, and the huge capital would get stranded in terms of investment in the RLNG terminal. Now, another question has come up from the user industry. This is from Mr. Rohit from Chennai, and the question is whether does domestically produced natural gas also participate in the gas pool for supply to the fertilizers units. Yeah, yes, Rohit, that's correct. In fact, there was a policy almost a year back of the pooling mechanism where the all the plants, the urea plants would be, the requirement would be assessed, and there will be a pooling mechanism wherein the domestic gas along with the imported gas would be pooled, and there would be a price would be based on the weighted average price, and then they will have to pay on that price only. So that would be the answer for this. Another question related to the similar industry is that whether fertilizer industry, how the increase demand is there of gas from the fertilizer industry. This was covered in my presentation also, and I would repeat it here that uh, this fertilizer industry, primarily it is a urea, where it is RLNG is used as the natural gas is used as a feedstock, and if it is a feedstock and the urea sector is growing, there are three plants which are to be converted from naphtha to natural gas, and already those plants have already complied with all the guidelines. Only hindrance is the pipeline, the laying of the pipeline. So that would increase the natural gas demand. And then five plants, urea plants, are getting are getting revived by the government, which would also increase the demand. And lastly, from the import dependence has to be reduced to nil. So again, that would also ensure that also require higher natural gas demand. So fertilizer is going to be the key sector, would lead the pack for the increased demand of the natural gas. Please let us know if any more questions, any more queries are required. So we are there to answer. You can also mail us. Yeah, another, I think, yeah, we have another question from Mr. Sunil Jan. What steps have been taken to reduce the dependence on the imported gas? Yeah, Mr. Sunil Jan, historically, we have seen that there has been a reduction in the production of the domestic gas. So the only thing which I can perceive is that if we want to reduce the imported gas, we need to increase or enhance the production of the domestic gas. However, it is not the case right now, but the government is keen, which is reflected with the policies such as HELP and OALP, which has been covered by Jyotsna in the presentations to significantly enhance the domestic production of the natural gas. So initially the regulatory things are in place. Now we have to see what action takes place on the ground at the ground level to increase the domestic gas, and that's the only solution, I think.
Okay, we have another question from Ashish. He says, in the light of increasing thrust on the electricity, will demand for fossil fuels uh, bring down over a period of time? See, basically, power sector, the peaking demand is taken care by thermal power only, either coal or gas based. So there is, even though there is a increasing thrust on renewable, but the demand for thermal power is not, it cannot be replaced with either renewable or other forms of generation. Only thing is, because of its costlier nature, probably gas-based powers will remain important from peaking power point of view, but thermal powers per se, the demand will not come down over a period of time. Okay, we have another question from Navjot. He's asking, what regulatory changes we think will fuel the production and consumption of LNG? So, being a cleaner fuel, as we highlighted, it is imperative that under the global accords also, more and more consumption of clean fuel is encouraged, and the price of environmental impact of this cannot be quantified. So, though it may appear to be costlier in terms of per unit cost, the demand for LNG will remain will increase over a period of time, and other regulatory changes probably which can give impetus to this would be clearances. I mean, the ease of doing this, implementing these projects, the infrastructure which is required in addition to the RLNG terminals, which can make available the gas at the right place at the right time to the consumer units. That will be imperative for ensuring the growth and prospects of this industry.
We've received another question from Ruchi Agrawal. The question is, will EV, the electric vehicle buzz, impact the demand for CNG in the near term? What is your view? I think the EV business. It's first of all, it is yet to be tested and yet to be tried and tested, and it is a long way to go once we come to a conclusion that EV business is, the vehicles are that is a viable business and that can be implemented across. And again, we say that EV business is only towards the uh, two-wheelers and four-wheelers, however passenger vehicles, however commercial vehicles which are, which takes tonnage of the tons of the cargo, whether that would be applicable or not is yet to be seen. So as of now, as we understand, we don't see much of a threat from EV business as of now.
Thanks again to all the participants for taking out their time and being part of this Care Ratings webinar. We hope the discussion was insightful and look forward to your participation in future also. Thanks.